Continuamos con el siguiente panel.
Panel: Infraestructura y tendencias globales del mercado de GNL. El rol relevante del GNL en la demanda global de energía. Mehdi Chenofi, gerente general de GNL y originación de Shell.
Invitamos al doctor Mehdi Chenofi, gerente general de GNL y originación de Shell, para que realice la presentación introductoria del panel.
Gracias. Sorry, my Spanish is not good enough, so I will do it in English. Thank you for inviting us to this beautiful city and great conference. I will go through the Shell LNG Outlook, a very short version of it, but you can download it from shell.com. Most important slide: do not believe anything I say. That being said, of course, this is the work of hundreds of beautiful people from Shell. I'm just representing them here. So there is a lot of work behind, and quite a few of my colleagues are here if you have more specific questions. Yeah, the title was around just energy transition. So I wanted to start with this slide that simply shows that in the OECD countries, basically gas consumption will peak. However, the rest of the world, a population of 6.5 billion people and a GDP of 40% of the rest of the planet, gas consumption will continue to grow. The other message is that by 2040, it is estimated that gas consumption will grow by 500 BCM, but also that LNG will overtake pipeline gas. Throughout the presentation, I will show a few numbers just to give people a sense of what's going on worldwide. This is just about the industries. A lot of the gas goes to power, buildings, and industry. And this is to give you an idea of what's happening in China. This is just the steel industry in China. Its total emissions is equal to the emissions of the UK, Turkey, and Germany together. And if you convert 30% or 35% of the coal used in the steel industry in China today, you will save the emissions of Australia. And only 5% you get to the consumption, the gas consumption of Brazil. So it gives you a sense of the scale. We talked about industry in China. Let's move to buildings. It is one of the areas where gas will be consumed and where consumption will grow. This is in the UK. The UK has around 40 million buildings. 75% of these buildings consume natural gas. And that 75% of energy is equal to 2 times the total electricity generation of the UK. So people always talk about renewables, but renewables chiefly goes into electricity generation or electricity consumption. And we forget about everything else. And today, electricity is barely 20 to 25% of the world's energy consumption. The other thing that is important to notice is that the flexibility of natural gas is 3 times the flexibility of electricity. Natural gas can be stored, electricity can't, or at least is a lot more expensive to store. And then we show that it's the same in the rest of the world. This is just a quick snapshot of what happened last year. Basically, LNG prices dropped quite substantially, mostly because of higher nuclear generation in France, Korea, and Japan, but also much milder weather and very high inventories. So JKM dropped versus 2022, but remained at a much higher level than the 5-year average. This is a quick one on really where the industry sentiment is. So on your left-hand side, you can see that storage levels were at their peak, at their maximum, when compared to the 5-year average. But that being said, when you look at the volatility, every time there is an event that didn't necessarily lead to changes in production or consumption, you see how TTF went up and down 15%. Actually, the first event was a record volume traded on TTF. The second event in Australia didn't even affect production, but still. And that shows that the market remains very, very nervous, despite the fact that there is plenty of LNG. This is really the summary of the big consumption patterns, 2023 versus 2022. Two messages. The first one is China went up 8 million tons, but from a very, very low level in 2022. And then the two big countries in red, Germany and the Netherlands, consumed a lot more because they build new terminals. But at the same time, you can see that they imported a lot less from their neighbors, the UK and France. Overall, the LNG industry is at 404 million tons. Just to give you an idea, 404 million tons is equivalent to 100,000 barrels a day of production. So LNG remains extremely small. Here, we talk a little bit about what will happen in 2024. And remember, the Shell LNG outlook is not the Shell view, but it's the aggregate of the view of all the vendors and consultants. And the message here is that they struggle to figure out how much LNG will hit the market in 2024. You can see a very wide range of almost 20 million tons. It's the uncertainty around who will start and when. And as a consequence, they don't know where the LNG will go. So they put all the uncertainty in the European markets. The second message that you can see on your right-hand side. So we said the industry is 400 million tons. In 2024 alone, the world will add 100 million tons of regas capacity, mostly in Europe and China. And just in case you didn't know, the total regas capacity worldwide is around 1,000 million tons. So adding 10% is also material. This is also an important slide that shows that over the next 4 or 5 years, we expect 80 million tons to hit the LNG tanks, mostly from Qatar and the US, of course. Two messages. The first one is, if you've been in the industry like me for 25 years, we've seen these cycles before. Of course, when Qatar showed up in 2009, and then Australia and the US. So this time, the volume is much larger, but if you look at the percentage of the additional LNG supply versus the market, the percentage is dropping. So we believe it will be absorbed probably a lot faster. For those who were there in 2009, when the Qatari trains came in, LNG prices collapsed to 9.5% Brent. But then, of course, Fukushima happened. And then when the Australian and US projects showed up, LNG prices dropped to 11.5%. And then we had COVID and everything else. So what will happen next is unknown, of course. I did not bring my crystal ball this time. What we know also, as you can see on the your right-hand side, is that there is material latent demand, be it because of weather or the very many countries needing LNG to cover their declining domestic demand, but also, of course, the shipping, the LNG for transport that is growing almost exponentially. And finally, the fuel switching. Many countries are trying to meet their pledges to net zero, and we can see conversion from liquid fuels to natural gas and LNG. So overall, huge supply coming to market, 80 million tons, but the timing is uncertain, and material demand sitting on the other side, waiting to take it. This is the slide we've always shown almost over the last decade. The charts in the middle show an economic term is called, actually, let's start with the forecasting. The slide on the left is the forecast, so it's bottom up, and it shows that we still need material investment to meet the demand by 2030. But if you believe in the pledges, so backcasting from the government pledges, you should invest in LNG because the world will not need it. But the truth must be in the middle. And then on the left-hand side, this is the consultant prediction on where the LNG growth will be by 2040, around 650 million tons. But what you may not notice from the slide is that over the last 3 years, their perception of the growth changed, and they see a lower demand for LNG because of decarbonization and electrification. This is another snippet, again, on the Chinese market, just to give you a sense. China will add next year and the year after more gas-fired power generation than the entire UK system. This is just in the next 2 years. China will add more regas capacity than India next year, and then more than Korea and Taiwan together over the next 2 years. And then they're doing the same on storage. My best quote on regas terminals is like, there was this wise man that said the best time to plant a tree is 20 years ago. The best time to build a regas terminal is also 20 years ago. It's never today. A quick look at these markets where gas is needed for power rather than industries and buildings. These are the countries of Southeast Asia with substantial decline in domestic production. And again, we see this market growing to 60 million tons by 2035, but the bottleneck will be regas terminals. If they don't build more regas terminals or develop more upstream gas, they will run out of electricity. A quick one on South America. I don't know how I'm doing on time. I'm probably late already. South America, same story. We see renewable growing, and therefore LNG or gas to power decreasing. But of course, we see industry and commercial use demand growing. The bulk of the gas is produced in Argentina and Brazil, of course, more than 80%. And this is, on the left-hand side, the consultant's view on where LNG demand will grow. You can see there is a very, very wide range of prediction or expectations. But by 2040, the balance is really on the more LNG is needed than less. Finally, a quick one on the US. The chart in the middle shows what is being producing right now and under construction. So by 2030, the US will get to 200 million tons. That's 5% of the total gas production in the world, 30% of the total LNG production, and 20% of the total gas produced in North America. So what we're saying is that LNG will have an impact on natural gas production in the US, and natural gas production in the US will have an impact on LNG prices. We're also saying that because in North America gas is produced in really 4 main, let's call gas blocks from Canada to the Haynesville in the south of the US, not everything is equal. You have subsurface risks that are completely different, and of course, above surface risk. And that's all from me. Thank you so much for listening.